And maybe I can get those books, the authors that you
Sure.
recommended, and I will put that on the website along with the video
Sure.
of this. Our last speaker.
Sure.
Oh,
So, yeah.
okay. Well, these wonderful speakers are here because of Dr. Beachler. She has helped us so much in getting all these wonderful professionals here. And she is an Edina mom, and she specializes in cardiovascular disease prevention, stress management, lifestyle management, general women's health, and integrative approaches that support the mind, body, and spirit.
Not computers.
Yes.
Not computers.
And she is going to talk to us about the holistic approach to educational success, why we need to pay attention to our children's mind, body, and spirit.
About that. So just as a background, I think the fact that you guys are here on a Saturday morning are part of the group that's going to hopefully put some of this into practice for our kids in the school. Like folks mentioned, I have a 7-year-old, and can you help us actually get it on the screen, though, when you're done? Sorry. 7-year-old and 4-year-old that are just starting in Edina schools, and I particularly chose these schools because of the reasons that many of you guys have. But I think that we have a little bit of work to do as it relates to, let's see if this, that must be something else, as it relates to some of our well-being policies. And, school for the kids is like work for us, or home if you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home parent, whatever the case is. I mean, that's where they're spending the bulk of their day. And so I just think we need to, I'm going to show you some stats on adults that are true for all of us here. Thank you. But hopefully you see the connection that Mary Beth just went through in terms of what we need both for our health and education. So I think there's a play to follow in here, so I'm hoping that I can keep us on time, but now my slides are not working. Okay, so just quickly, how many of you feel like health is in your control? Good. So the reality I just want to emphasize here is, having gone through many, many, many years of school as a cardiologist, that I thought I was going to be able to control this with pills and interventions, and it's not the case. That all of health, as you'll see, comes outside of the doctor's office. Why is it doing this? That's odd, but just to make things a little bit slower for us. So we have seen obesity rates mirror exactly what's happening with our depression rates. And Susan was up here earlier, and when we see over and over from communities, what communities say are the biggest two needs that they have, it's mental health and obesity. And they go hand in hand, and we're seeing this happen. And I just want to show you what's happened. So the obesity, you can Google it. It's defined by body mass index. If it's greater than 25, it's overweight. Greater than 30 is considered obese. The darkest blue states have the highest obesity rates. And I'm going to show you what's happened over the next, since 1985. So that was 5 years later. You can see how many more states were considered obese. 1995, we added a new category, about 20% of obesity. 2000, another new category, greater than 20%. 2005, two new categories, upwards of 30% obesity in the United States. 2008, 2010, and we were doing so well there. I wonder what happened. Interesting. Here we are in 2011. So how many of you think that that's genetics? It doesn't matter. But the reality is, genetics can't change that quickly. So, as I often tell people who think that cardiology conditions are all genetics, it's a small portion, but when we look at the data, it's about 20%. And actually what we see is families modeling those behaviors. And again, I think we see the same thing from a mental health component. While there's certainly genetic components, we see kids learning the skills that their parents have or don't have. So that's why we are trying to do so much of this in tandem in health. We're trying to help equip adults with skills to cope with skills for positive behaviors. But meanwhile, I just believe so strongly we could stop mopping up our spills if we did things a lot earlier with kids in schools. Unfortunately, when we look at the data, the places that have the worst rates of obesity are the states that have the highest health disparities and that have the highest rates of minorities. And we see a huge health inequity in that in what's, the Delta region down in the in the southeast corner of the United States. We have the largest health disparities in the country in a 1.5 mile radius from Lake of the Isles to North Minneapolis, which again, as we continuously improve our outcomes as a state, we don't see those same changes happen here. And Edina is becoming a little bit more diverse slowly, and it's something that we need to think about to make sure that, again, what we're doing in our school is taking full into account the different cultures that we're seeing. So when we look at determinants of health, just like I talked about from a cardiology perspective, and as you'll see many other different chronic disease properties, the reality is healthcare, where we wait to go and see a doctor, really only has about 20% to do with health outcomes, and it has everything else to do with our behaviors, our environment, what we call our social determinants. So you can see on here education, employment, income. I mean, there's so much of this that is riding on our schools and what we have to offer our kids that, again, this can't be an add-on that gets taken away because there's not enough legislative money or before or after kids program or 20 minutes of something in a school day. It has to actually be incorporated into every part of what we're doing with curriculum. So our current model, again, you're going to see these merging together, is that we wait until people have a certain condition. So this is how I learned in medical school. I wait until you have high blood pressure so I can diagnose it, and then I can give you a pill to treat it. I wait until you have diabetes, then I can give you a pill or insulin to treat it. I wait until you have high cholesterol, then I can give you a pill to treat it, for all of these things. And the reality is, and we've created specialties like cardiologists and nephrologists and endocrinologists that deal with these different subsects of the disease. But when we look at the roots of the problem for all of those disease processes, they're very, very similar, right? And they get back to those behaviors of eating well, moving more, not smoking, not drinking too much. But when we take that a little bit deeper, it gets into our social connection, how we connect with our neighbors, how we balance ourselves each day from a mental health before we have mental illness perspective. It gets into really thinking of sleep as a core value and restoration, and that we need this every day. And again, a huge part of that being what we're putting in our mouth all day long, what you heard from Chef Marshall, what you heard from Mary Beth. This is huge. And then gets into that physical activity, what I like to call movement, that is more than cardiovascular exercise. It's strength, it's balance, and again, is probably more than gym class each day. Oops, now it's moving too fast. Isn't that funny? Well, that's good, probably time-wise. But this is just a slide. Again, so why should you all matter here? Because this actually correlates hugely with longevity. So when we look at the 4 major risk factors of not eating well, not getting enough physical activity, smoking or drinking in a hazardous fashion, it turns out that that's about 14 years of extra added life when we reverse those to the positive behaviors. And this is something that's been shown in studies. It's not like you had to do it right from 0 and on or 18 and on. We've actually seen midlife, when folks turn around, get their obesity levels under control, stop smoking, aren't drinking hazardously, et cetera, and are moving 30 minutes a day, that they can expect an extra decade of life over that 14 years of life. So it's got real dividends. Now, I started along the cardiology route, was trying to just push more and more education. People need to eat better, they need to move more. And then you peel back that onion and you see exactly what we see in schools. 70 to 90% of all of our chronic disease visits to clinics have to do with stress. And there's no pill for that. There's absolutely no pill for that. So we have to have different coping skills, different ways as a culture that we're changing this. As you can see, the current environment, if drugs were the solution, and I'm not trying to say they can't be part of the solution, we would be winning the race. North America makes up 48% of all pharmaceutical sales in the entire world. But it turns out with this great healthcare system that, for the most part, I'm very proud to be a part of, we continue to have worse outcomes with the amount of money that we're pouring into this. So it's right now we spend $2.5 trillion on our healthcare system. 70% of that is on preventable illness. So just think about, if we actually, I can't tell you how many times I've spent time at the legislature saying, how can we start to shift dollars that we put into healthcare into schools? Because I just showed you that it's actually the education of our culture that's such a huge determinant of our actual health outcomes. But those two committees are different committees. Education's different than Health and Human Services, and somehow we need to, as parents in this community, start to push that these are interconnected in one. By 2023, that's estimated to be $4.3 trillion in the United States. Right now, it's 16% of our gross domestic product and continues to grow every year. It's double the amount that other countries spend on this, and yet we continue to fall as it ranks in terms of outcomes worldwide for health. And again, I think we're seeing that same thing from an education standpoint. So these two areas are interconnected and really can't be looked at separate. So I would say the answer is all of us. We can't wait for a socialized healthcare system, or, I think for our school districts to do it alone for us, that we have to kind of think of how can we start to change the culture here. And certainly I continue, I chose Edina in part while I was renting a house in Minneapolis and working with Blue Cross and the mayor of Edina, Mayor Hovland, on really a policy to have our streets more walkable, more bikeable, to put different policies in place locally here, and was really impressed with the movement in Edina. And that was, in fact, what I said, okay, between the schools and where this community is going, this is where I want to raise my family. But what can you do right here, right now, this summer? Well, let's take a look. So sleep we talked about, and if there's one thing and you go home and you do tonight, it's to get a good night's sleep, to stay in those pajamas tomorrow a little bit longer, and maybe next time I'll give the presentation in my pajamas despite my daughter. But looking at those same stats in terms of what can change quickly, our genetics for what we need for sleep also cannot. So 100 years ago we averaged 8 hours of sleep. Tonight we now average 6 hours of sleep, and our bodies haven't changed. We still need, again, somewhere between 6 and 8. Some people need 6 hours, but the people like myself who need 8 hours, you can't get away with just getting 6, throwing in some more laundry, responding to some more emails. The best thing you can do for yourself is sleep. And when you see what happens when we get less sleep, it leads to weight gain, immune compromise. We're pushing out more of those catecholamines. We're feeling more anxious. It relates directly to our mental health. So all the problems that we're seeing that we're trying to Band-Aid with other solutions, again, we see that correlate here. We've talked a lot about resilience, but I just want to emphasize that just as another take-home that you can do tonight, both for you and your children. My 7-year-old and my 4-year-old's getting very close, but it's a boy. He's just doesn't, I'm probably putting gender bias into this, but he just isn't there yet to be able to do this. But my 7-year-old and I, every night, say to each other 3 things that we're thankful for about that day. And it's a wonderful thing. For me, it's one of my favorite parts of the day for her to say, Grandma got me off the bus today, and for me to feel less guilty as a mom that I wasn't there to get her off the bus, and for me to think that that was one of the 3 highlights of her day was doing that. Or she'll say, all morning long, this morning she's been coloring, and I think I have a picture of this, but I do not have an artistic bone in my body, and I realize that she is built completely different, and that is one of her therapeutic tools that we use all the time at the Penny George Institute, and that is how she sort of processes the week, and just it's part of who she is. And so she'll talk about having the chance to just color and to not be rushed, and so try it, do it with your spouse, do it with your partner, take a chance. This is something that we've added to our guidelines from a healthcare perspective in terms of things that you can tip the scale in your favor of decreasing the likelihood of having depression happen later on. Again, we've talked about there are absolutely folks that need treatment for depression. I'm not trying to say that there are chemical predispositions, but this is one thing to help produce those positive catecholamines. Food as medicine, I think it's been talked about a lot, but that's how we're nourishing ourselves. Everything that you're putting in your body is going to make a difference, and we've got a lot of work to do in the schools. I have to say that's one of the things I'm most disappointed. My daughter's the only one in her first grade class that brings fruit, and she continuously asks me for, the yogurt-covered raisins that every other kid's getting. Those, the average Yoplait yogurt-covered raisins are not a great choice for our kids. I think there's lots of things that we could do. She goes to kids clubs twice a week. Trix cereal, these are not good things to give my kid after she's been concentrating for 8 hours in school for another 2 hours of a kids club. So we can think about the behaviors that we want to see by the foods that we're serving our kids. And for ourselves. I would ask all of you how you cope with stress. Many of my favorites are on here. There's a reason why they call grilled cheese comfort food. For many others, it's alcohol or cigarettes. And so I just think these are natural tendencies that our kids see and learn from us. And they take time to change, but they absolutely can. I think you've heard a lot about sugar, but I just want to put on there again, there's just been more information coming out on the behaviors that we see, and we certainly see it directly related to chronic disease. And so many of my folks will think, oh, I did great. I had a processed turkey sandwich on white bread and a Yoplait yogurt and sugar, and lots of nitrates and other things that you don't need in that meat. So think about that. We talked about some of those coping strategies. I think you've seen this in terms of what happens with stress. We send all those fight or flight responses that you want if you put your hand on a stove. We need to be able to react, but every day we don't want to be constantly reacting because it, in fact, again, causes us to have weight gain. It causes us to be more likely to have diabetes, hypertension, cancer, etc. Got to tame that tiger. I frequently write a prescription for my patients to connect socially. This is so huge, and we have tons of data. This is another area that Susan and her team in our community benefits office are working on, getting neighbors and communities to connect around health. It's a twofer in that way, but regardless, everybody in here, you're connecting today, but that we need to be connecting because we know it helps us thrive. It's going to help us feel like we're a bigger part, that we have that purpose that we're all searching for. So I just wanted to add this in. This is my family. It was so funny. Last night I was putting this together, and I was starting to Google stock families of photos. And I said to my husband, what am I doing? We actually are a real family. We can do this. But I just think I was up in Duluth yesterday giving grand rounds at Essentia Health up there, and somebody came up to me after and said, how do you do this? How do you balance things? And I just want to say I'm as real as they come. My husband's a doc. We have a very busy family. My kids, I worry about them being too organized because of the life that we've put together for them. They don't eat perfectly. I often think, oh gosh, somebody's going to see what my kids eat, and it's real. But I am constantly thinking about ways that I can incorporate this. And for us, that means that when we go on vacation, which we recently were up in the left, we commit to being together as a family and we put our devices away. I don't answer emails from work a certain number of vacations a year because thankfully I work for a place where I have a good vacation policy. But I really try to model that so the kids can see that. When I left to come here today, I said, to my husband, make sure we're always constantly talking about how difficult it is to put away those devices, but let's remind ourselves together to interact as a family since there's so much time we're not. That also means for us that we're doing fun things like biking where it doesn't seem like movement, or, we try to do different types of vacations where we're swimming more or playing tennis or things that, again, it's not perceived as exercise. I think we talked about nature being therapeutic. This was from a recent getaway with my daughter up there with the roses. She loves going around and really smelling the roses. And it's amazing if you just let them help guide this and let them be kids, like hopefully many of us, I know I did have the chance to just be a kid. They can really, again, have some of these times to just breathe. And then on the lower left is a picture of my daughter's art was displayed this year, and it's just, I think, taking time to appreciate what's so important for them and not just what's important to us is so great. So seize the summer. It's coming. It's going to be 80 degrees next week. Create habits that start to last because you can do this, whatever that is for you. Run your first 5K, walk to 50th in France. My neighbors and I talk about connecting art tonight, walking together down to 50th in France to grab dinner. So I think there's ways to that's, one more mile that you got in the day because there will come a time, not long, perhaps next week, where it'll be snowing again. I think taking the chance to just try some different foods now because all of the stuff, the strawberries are starting to come in from other areas of the country, but pretty soon here we'll also be having some local goods. And just, I love this quote because it gets to the heart, and which is my area of specialty, but I think this is so key. Peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of all of those things and still be calm in your heart. And I think that's so key because I'm not suggesting anybody quit their job or, live a completely different life as much as I'm saying we have to be able to find that calm each day in small ways to slow that tiger, tame that tiger. So keep these words in mind. I think they're very positive, but they get at those educational pieces, thinking about how we nourish ourselves. I'm thinking of that in a food way in particular, but also from a mind, body, and spirit perspective. Give our chance and our kids and our families some fun things to learn, replenish ourselves with therapeutic sleep, connect with our community and our kids whenever we can. Take the chance to breathe. It's so amazingly therapeutic, and let your body move. Pretty simple, straightforward things, but really are the keys to health. So that's what I have. I think the play is coming in because one of my neighbors in it. So we're going to probably have to get out of here, but certainly can stick around for questions. Thanks for being here, guys.